When I first pulled into the parking lot, the very first thing I noticed was how vintage the building looked. The entire exterior looked to have been made in the early 60s. Personally, I didn't mind the aesthetic. I'm actually somewhat of a fan of architectural history, so any chance I get to experience something like this up close, I take it. The reason I was even at a hotel in the first place was because I had to travel out of state for an interview with a potential new employer. When the company was setting up the interview, I asked if we could possibly do the interview over the phone, but the receptionist stated that the hiring manager likes to meet in person. I was a bit apprehensive traveling such a distance just for a job interview, but the job seemed too good to pass up. The receptionist seemed to sense my concern and once again mentioned that the trip would be paid for, regardless if I got the job or not. They said they would put me in a hotel for the night, and I would do the job interview in the morning, then be free to stay another night or just travel back home. Did I mention the job was too good to pass up? I told them that it would be fine and I would leave as soon as possible. They gave me the address for the hotel which they had reserved a room for me. I thought that was somewhat odd as normally the person chooses a hotel and the company just reimburses them. My father traveled a lot for work. That thought didn't stick in my mind for long, however. They were giving me a couple free nights in a hotel after all. Stepping out of my car, I looked closer at the building before me. It wasn't immensely tall, like your typical hotel, nor was it super flashy. When you travel downtown a major city, it's hard not to see massive logos for hotels on most of the skyscrapers. The building before me seemed plain, but not in a bad way. To me, it seemed like it was built during a time where there was only a need for one hotel for miles, so it didn't have to try as hard to draw in customers. Another oddity that stood out about this place was the absence of any name. There was just a red neon sign buzzing faintly in the dusk that simply said hotel. This was a first for me, as even family-owned bed and breakfasts had names to them. Ironically, the directions I were given by the company was just an address, and the word hotel, which was quite fitting. I walked up to the front door with my bag slung over my shoulder and I turned the handle. The door creaked as if it hadn't been opened for a very long time. The creaking echoed through the lobby and up the adjacent stairwell. As I stepped inside, the dull yellow light bulbs on the walls struggled to illuminate every part of the lobby. The crimson carpet in the lobby clashed with the yellow walls that surrounded me. It made me think that I was standing on a giant Winnie the Pooh. As I stared at the decorum, my attention was turned to a voice of a young woman saying, "May I help you?" I looked over and saw a woman sitting behind a faded brown counter. I quickly shuffled over to her and told her that I had a room reserved. She asked for my name and I gave it to her. She then told me to wait a moment while she looked me up, but I noticed that there weren't any computers that I could see. It was possible she could have been using a tablet or something, but just as I craned my neck to see over the counter, she placed a small brass key with a tag on it right in front of me. She told me my room number and pointed to the stairs. The whole interaction was strange, but I tried not to think of it as I thanked the woman and headed up the stairs. When I arrived at my door, I began to feel a strange sensation. I know it sounds odd, but it felt like overwhelming anxiety was washing over me. Almost as if I was about to address thousands of people with nothing prepared. I was nervous, but couldn't find a reason as to why. I put the key in the door and opened it. The room was just as plain as the building itself. It had one small bed, a small nightstand with an old telephone resting on top of it. A small alarm clock sat next to the phone. There was a small bathroom next to the front door. Though, I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure how they fit a sink, shower, and a toilet into this tiny room. I nearly had to stand on the toilet just to close the door. There was a small window opposite the front door that showed the parking lot, and that was about it for the room. Dusk had already come and went by the time I was settled in. Seeing that there wasn't much to do in town and being as late as it was, I chose to just turn in early for the night. There wasn't anything outwardly unnerving about the hotel, but for some reason, I didn't really want to stay any longer than I had to. I set the alarm clock for 7 a.m. the next day and went to sleep. At around 1 a.m., I woke up with the urge to answer nature's call, so to speak, and quickly rushed to the bathroom. After I was finished and washed my hands, I walked back over to the bed, but that's when something caught my eye. At the bottom corner of the nightstand, sticking out of it was the corner of a piece of paper. My curiosity overcame me even in my groggy state, and I leaned down to fish the paper out. I got up from the bed and switched on the light from the room and glanced down at the paper. What I read disturbed me, and I'm not entirely sure what to make of it. Whoever wrote this letter had used a red pen and wrote so rapidly that it was hard to read some parts. But I will now transcribe as best I can the contents of this letter. It's been an entire month since I arrived. I have become trapped in this place, held against my will by some unknown force. This may sound like a work of fiction, some story made up to entertain. I assure you that is not the case. I first noticed the strange occurrence when I first attempted to leave the hotel. I gathered my bag and made my way to the lobby. As I reached for the front door, I found myself waking up in my hotel room. The first 2 times this happened, I considered the possibility of lucid dreaming. Though the more times it happened, the more I considered the possibility of purgatory. It's been a week and I haven't had any contact with anyone. The receptionist is nowhere to be found. The phone has a dial tone, but the moment any number is pressed, the tone stops. I don't get any service on my cell phone, even if I hold it outside of the window. I don't know who or what is keeping me here, but I need to find a way out. Day 14. I've attempted to break into the numerous rooms on my floor, each meeting with the same result. Once the door gives way, I wake up back in my bed. I'm running out of options. Day 16. I attempted to jump from the room window, and upon landing, my legs fractured. The agony I felt for a few seconds halted me from attempting that course again. Day 20. I set the hotel on fire. Didn't work. Not sure what else to do. It's been 25 days in this hellish place, but today was the first time something different happened. Today I saw someone new. He was a tall man standing at the end of the corridor. He wore a black suit with a cloak draped over it. A black top hat adorned his head. I called out to him, but he didn't acknowledge me. I wanted to approach him, but something deep inside of me begged me to avoid him. I listened to my instinct and went back to my room. Day 30. That man I mentioned earlier is now standing outside of my door. His face is inches away from the peephole. I don't want to open the door. I'm scared. If somebody finds this, leave now while you still can. The letter trails off there. Reading this letter gave me a sudden sensation of dread. Something about this place felt off to me, but reading this letter seemed to cement my suspicions. I quickly gathered up my things in the middle of the night, dashed down to the lobby, placed my key on the counter, and walked over to the front door. I hesitated briefly before reaching for the handle and turning it. I thought for sure I would end up like the person who wrote the letter, but the door creaked open once again and I rushed outside. I briskly walked across the parking lot to my car, got inside, and drove home. I felt guilty not attending the interview, but I wasn't that desperately in need of employment. On my trip back home, I stopped at a gas station to fill up my car, and as I stood at the pump, I glanced at the small LCD screen. It flashed today's date, February 20th. That wasn't possible. My interview was scheduled for January 20th, and I had arrived at the hotel on the 19th of January. This made me nervous. After I finished filling my tank and got back into my car, I felt something hard inside my pocket, something I hadn't noticed earlier. I reached my hand into my pocket, and I pulled out a single red pen. I'm not sure what's going on, but I think I'm losing my mind. There's no way I wrote that letter, right? That I had been trapped in that hotel for a month. But I have no memory of being there for more than a few hours. I have since called family and friends. Surely they would have noticed something amiss, but they all told me that they've interacted with me recently, within the past few days. I know for a fact that I left for the interview on January 19th, but I didn't make it home until February 20th. Yet nobody seems to have noticed me missing for a full month. Like I said, I'm probably losing my mind. But I think I'll be avoiding sketchy old hotels, at least for a while.